So Chris, you will have been aware of all of the feedback from around this area and further south. What's your reaction to that? Is this just background noise, or is there something serious going on?
Oh, look, no, I really understand the concerns that have been expressed, particularly by mums and the midwives. There's some significant challenges facing maternity services in New Zealand, and particularly in the rural settings, those concerns are amplified. So completely understand. What we're targeted on is trying to enhance primary maternity services and integration with secondary.
Now obviously everybody understands you have to balance the books and you've got some financial challenges, but why pick on maternity services? I mean, surely that's the last thing where you would cut corners, but clearly corners are being cut.
Well, I don't agree with you there. The primary maternity strategy in terms of implementation of it is costing us more. We've established greater degrees of infrastructure, particularly in Te Anau and in Wanaka. The funding model for independent midwives, lead maternity carers, is broken, particularly for the rural midwives. And we've taken a step around introducing a sustainability fund for them and putting additional support in for the midwives in remote areas to be able to have breaks, which previously have not been covered by anyone. So we're investing more, but it's only a step towards a sustainable position.
So you're saying that these services in Te Anau, Lumsden, other places are being improved, but we're hearing from numerous people, including doctors and midwives, that the services have been degraded. Like in Te Anau, your manager said the hub was open, but it's not. In Lumsden, they haven't received everything they were promised. The services are less. In Wanaka, the services are famously less. In Queenstown, we have midwives virtually in tears saying that everything's broken. So I'm having trouble reconciling your statement that everything's fine and improved when everybody else says things have got a lot worse and lives are at risk.
Yeah. The changes in Lumsden, I can understand that community calling Lumsden a downgrade. The infrastructure, we have had some teething issues with the infrastructure around the hubs, and we have taken deliberate steps to make sure that infrastructure is there. In Wanaka, we'll be opening a new facility in terms of maternal and child hub later in the year when the facility is available. And prior to us making any changes, we've had to take unusual steps of bringing in locums into Wanaka because there were simply no midwives available to provide services. Yeah.
See, the Mayor, Jim Bolt, is a businessman, but he told us last week that something like 80% of the babies in this part of the world are born elsewhere, born in Dunedin or Invercargill. In 2019, in one of the world's premium destinations, how can we have New Zealanders forced to be separated when they're having a new baby?
Well, 80% sounds alarming, but internationally, 70% of all women are secondary births. And so therefore, by default, those women will need to go to a secondary facility. And I know there's a debate about should there be a base hospital in this region, and that debate won't finish today. It will continue on as we move forward in the planning. So 70% of women from this region will by default have to go to a secondary facility, and that leaves the remaining 30. So I don't know if the numbers that Jim quoted are exactly right, but they're there or thereabouts, and that's simply a reflection of the delineation between primary and secondary. And also, the further away you are from a secondary facility, the more likely women are to make decisions to travel.
But the reality is that here midwives are having to use a helicopter transfer, as we understand it, at least once a day at maybe $10,000 a go. So it doesn't take much to realise that A, that could fund better quality secondary care here, and secondly, there's the risk of bad weather for the helicopter, so it's a very fragile link. Isn't it too dangerous to rely on helicopters to save people's lives instead of having a hospital here?
Well, look, I have I've heard that. I've watched some of the articles that you've published, and I've heard that claim of one helicopter transfer a day. That is not what our statistics say. Our statistics would indicate the greatest number that I've been able to find is a little over one a week. And when you look at the numbers, there's there's somewhere between 600 to 700 births in the Lakes Central Otago region per annum. So the concept of one woman being transferred by helicopter a day for maternity from Queenstown just doesn't stack up. But even then, your point about the cost of the helicopter transfers versus the cost of service delivery. And the challenge around secondary facility development is sustainability of the workforce. Because superficially one can look and say, for secondary maternity, you need an O&G consultant and an anaesthetist. I'd argue a paediatrician and probably a general surgeon. But the minute you have one of those, each of those, you need at least 4 of them to make a sustainable roster. And you look in other parts of the country where there are small facilities, they're constantly challenged from resourcing in terms of physical ability to get them, very reliant on locums and international medical graduates, and continuity of care and outcomes are always challenged.
We often have stories where people say, oh, there's the risk of somebody dying, and you think, well, we'll take that into account. But we've never before seen so many professionals saying that somebody is going to die soon. And just to drive that point home even further, Dr. Matthew Stokes, when he spoke to us in Lumsden last week, as a professional rural GP who sees a lot of drama, he was literally in tears speaking about this issue. So these are medical professionals who are so upset that they have reached breaking point. Isn't that something that you have to respond to instantly, not just with kind words, but with some action?
Yeah, absolutely. And the action that is needed is to attract more midwives into the region. And that is where the challenge about the overarching funding model does come to fruition. The fact that by putting sustainability packages in place, we have been able to attract 5 more midwives into this area. Money is not the only thing, but infrastructure, backup and support. And one of the challenges when you look at service specifications for what midwives are supposed to deliver for the resourcing that they're provided, one of the challenges is a midwife, independent midwife, is supposed to provide a second backup midwife. Now that's fine and easy in metropolitan Auckland or in the middle of Dunedin, where one side of the city to the other side of the city is, relatively close. But in this region, and the distances between backup midwives can be quite significant. So the trick is about attracting more and also making sure that the funding model recognises the diseconomies of scale. It's documented that a full caseload for a midwife is about 40 births a year. If we want to have adequate backup midwifery support in rural regions, the numbers for a sustainable model have to be lower because there just simply aren't the number of births to allow both the caseload for them to make a reasonable income and to be able to back each other up.
But look, everybody would sympathise with your need to get money from government, and that's based on this population model, which we all seem to accept is broken. The census didn't work. But given that we all do pay tax in this part of New Zealand, and your responsibility, you're the boss of the Southern DHB, how can you justify what you are doing right now, even accepting you want to make improvements in the future? These hubs seem to be regarded, and I'm going to use this word deliberately, as a joke, and I'll use the midwives' words themselves. They say, why do we need a room? We don't need a room. We can go and visit their mums in the home. They need oxygen, they need emergency equipment. You've taken that away, and they say babies and mothers are going to die. Don't we have to leave the fine words to one side and say something has to be done really urgently?
Well, I think we have to look at the real words. So when we consulted on the model of care across the broader region, there was actually a call for the maternal and child hubs. So I appreciate that those midwives who have spoken out have said they don't want them. But what we were told is that
Well, by your own methods. I mean, you can... there's been a lot of talk about your methods not being transparent, including the way these regions are mapped. I mean, we've seen a map from Dr. Stokes that shows little islands of Lumsden and little... aren't you manipulating that to achieve savings?
Well, I certainly heard what Dr. Stokes said, and I'd take exception to that because absolutely, in the public meeting that we had in Lumsden, that issue was raised, and when the issue was raised, there was matter of fact from the concerns that were raised that we did have some of the numbers wrong in terms of the boundaries. And hence why we undertook a review with independent midwives advising us. We looked at the boundaries, and historical geographical boundaries don't make sense in terms of planning, but looking at the overall birthing numbers across our region. We also had our process and our decision making, including those questions, reviewed by the Ministry of Health before we made the decisions.
Well, arguably, the Ministry of Health, just by the look of their actions, seem to want to save money, and they're putting pressure on you to save money. How did you feel yesterday morning when news broke of a baby born in an ambulance by the side of the road, just a short distance from Lumsden, that used to be open and isn't open anymore? How did you feel personally when you heard that news?
Well, personally, what I wanted to check on is, did things go well, the outcome. Obviously, from a confidentiality perspective, I can't go into great deal of details. However, mum and baby are well. In that instance, the midwife, I understand, met the mum in Lumsden, called an ambulance. They clearly decided that it was better to transfer to Invercargill. They would have had all the equipment, including oxygen, from the ambulance on site in Lumsden if they had have chosen to remain there. They made clinical decisions, and the birth did occur in an ambulance with a midwife and a paramedic.
But just minutes after it drove past the closed Lumsden Maternity Centre. Why? In what universe does that make any sense, that an ambulance has to drive past a facility that used to be open and is now closed on your watch?
From my understanding, and it is only my understanding, it only happened yesterday, they didn't drive past, they departed from. They departed from a facility with emergency birthing gear, with all the drugs, which we only checked again last week. And while there's a question about oxygen, which we're going to be investigating in terms of should maternal and child hubs have oxygen, my understanding is there would have been oxygen in the ambulance.
Well, there's oxygen in all ambulances. The question is, should babies be born on the road in ambulances or in proper friendly maternity centres where there can be fathers present? Well,
that ended up being a clinical decision, and I'm making an assumption around the clinical decision being that it was concern that there might need to be secondary support.
You can see how local people in Te Anau, Lumsden, Queenstown, Wanaka, Roxburgh, multiple reports of these hubs not being properly equipped. Your manager said that they were up and running when they weren't. That caused huge outrage. How can you explain that? How can she say they're operating when they're not operating?
Well, look, there have been some teething problems in terms of some of the equipment that we.
But it wasn't delivered, and the contract wasn't signed.
Some of the equipment we purchased based on valuations weren't in the condition that they were expected to be in when they were handed over, and we have the hub in a temporary base in Wanaka, with a move to a more permanent base coming up. And in Te Anau, it is a different relationship. It's a relationship and a partnership with Fiordland Medical Centre, and where we're providing the maternal and child hub in an integrated way. People were looking there for a lease of a physical facility, but the hub is a part of, the maternal and child hub is a part of the Fiordland Medical Centre.
Okay. Multiple sources saying that lives are at risk, 3 million tourists coming in, a booming population, no real solutions in sight from your direction. So if there is a death or deaths linked to a lack of medical facilities, would you resign? Would you commit to giving up your job as a statement of how seriously you take your responsibilities?
No, look, I get held to account for decisions that we make. Okay, I take exception about no real progress. We are making progress. We're moving this facility
That's
forward.
That's not evidence with the view of people who work at the coalface.
We're moving this facility forward. We've got more midwives joining this region. We're investing in the healthcare home of QMC, and we're saying, so what do we do now? 2 years ago, I thought, what do we do now? We've got at least 7 years. The population changes mean that those pressures are coming rapidly forward. So we need to, continue the planning and make the decisions about about appropriate facilities and infrastructure. But number one, in terms of maternity, yes, I hear people say that people will die. Robust midwifery care in the antenatal phase, robust emergency transport, and recently the helicopters have been upgraded from single engine helicopters to twin engine helicopters, so are able to fly in more inclement weather. Investing and continuing to focus and partner with emergency services, it is a balancing act of getting it right. But if we don't, the thing that I lie awake the most is about how to get more midwives into our region is much more important to me than specifically about individual facilities. We have to continue to invest in facilities and make sure it's the right one.